and on, the meat,
So there's not a whole lot of new pieces in this new phone, but there's technically more in this one than the baseline iPhone 14, because this one actually gets a silicon upgrade to the new A16 Bionic and 6 gigs of RAM. Top of the line, new 4nm system on a chip to the A13 Bionic from a couple years ago. In real life though, so far it's benchmarked very similar to an A15 Bionic, just slightly above, as expected. And that's meant, for me, rock solid performance, fluid animations, and a pretty reliable all-day battery life from both the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. But I'm gonna get more into battery now. eSIM only. eSIM isn't exactly a new thing, but not having a physical SIM tray anymore does have its pros and cons. Pros mainly being, okay, it's one less place for water to get in, one less moving part, but cons being that for international travel, if you just wanted to grab a SIM card real quick instead of going through the carriers, that's no longer nearly as easy. The iPhone's antennas now impressively can also communicate with straight-up satellites instead of cell towers, so it'll take longer, and you'll need a clear view of the sky, and the UI will literally help you point your phone at a certain satellite overhead, but it will let you send messages to a dispatcher or local emergency services to help get to your location and what you need help with. Really only the camera bumps changed. They are definitely slightly larger and thicker than the 13 Pros, but bottom line is when an iPhone 13 Pro can fit in an iPhone 14 Pro's case, and you know, it's pretty close.
What's going on? What's going on? It's the return.
Okay, so now we're really getting into the meat of what you really start to notice on these new phones. iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max have some slightly updated 6.1-inch and 6.7-inch OLED displays respectively. So they're still excellent displays on paper with slightly thinner bezels that you won't notice, and slightly higher resolution that you also won't notice, and an even higher, brighter 2000 nits peak brightness that you absolutely will notice when looking at the phone on like a bright sunny day. It looks great at 100% out in the sun. The always-on display looks like this. So you hit the power button, you sleep the phone, you put it down, the brightness drops, the LTPO OLED display goes all the way down to 1 Hertz, and you get to see the clock and notifications roll in as if your lock screen is still on, just at a lower transition from the home screen to the always-on display is really nice. It's got this smooth fade animation, and I think that's the Apple way. Like, the clock, if it's behind something, will graduate to the front of the always-on display, and it maintains all of the colors and skin tones in whatever wallpaper you were using. So it's not faded or black and white, you still have all your color. If you've got music playing, then your album art is front and center. It is extra beautiful. What's happening? Remember the rumors of the new Pro iPhone replacing the notch with an eye-shaped cutout in the top of the display with all those renders people made? Well, that's actually what this is. It has one circular cutout on the right for a new selfie camera and one pill-shaped cutout on the left for the new Face ID hardware, which they've shrunk down by about 30% to fill in this smaller area. And then instead of just doing that, Apple has cleverly decided to fill in the gap between them with black pixels and make it one big pick and pocket casts. So you have album art and the color matching waveform up there while the media is playing. If you tap it, it'll open the app that's playing. And if you long press it, you actually get a widget that pops up with some media controls that can scrub and everything. Pretty much the exact same widget that would appear in the lock screen. So this feels kind of backwards. I think a tap should open the widget and then a long press should open the app, and that would just make more sense, but whatever. The point is, it just works right off the rip. Matter of fact, here's everything that the dynamic island does right out the box on day one. So it does system alerts, like for incoming calls, connecting AirPods, plugging into a charger, switching the ringer to silent mode or volume on, Face ID unlocking, connecting AirPods, and a whole bunch more. There's our full list. And then it's also a UI for live activities happening in the background. So an ongoing call, or music playing in the background, any media, a timer counting down, maps directions as you navigate in the background, voice memos recording, screen recording, all that stuff. So here's a full list of that as well. And then any third-party app that uses the Now Playing or Call Kit APIs, which there are many. It also has a little spot for the indicator for microphone and camera access right in between the pill and the cutout. It really becomes next level when you have multiple background activities happening at once, because then it low-key kind of becomes like a that really pulled this whole thing together. There's physics to it. You poke the cutout and it wobbles and moves around a little like it's alive. And since there are real cutouts, like holes in the display for the camera and the Face ID system, it has to be touch sensitive in areas around the actual cutout so that it can still register taps when you touch a dead zone on the screen. And for the most part, it works pretty well. Is this a game-changing feature in a phone for most people? No. Is this a reason? No, that the Pro iPhone really is and has been all about the cameras. Fun fact, they spent 20 confidently repeating the 12 megapixel sensor since the iPhone 6S. But this year we got a leap. We got the leap. The primary camera on the iPhone 14 Pro is now a new 48 megapixel sensor. It's 65% larger than the one we had on the 12 Pro. It has a second generation focus shift optical image stabilization, 100% focus, and more light gathering from a larger sensor. That also gives you faster shutter speeds to freeze motion more often in non-perfect conditions. And it lets me take low light photos with a shorter shutter time, which is very convenient. But the larger sensor also gives you a really nice, shallow, natural depth of field without portrait mode, more than we've ever seen from an iPhone camera. Now, other phones I've seen do this just as well, but it presents a new set of challenges, like fringing and autofocus. But I've been very impressed with how well the iPhone deals with both. Not a whole ton of fringing on close-up subjects, and 100% coverage with focus pixels has been pretty locked in on tracking subjects and keeping things in focus, even with the shallow depth of field. My only complaint really is the pretty weak minimum focus distance. Things get blurred when you get close to the primary camera, so you gotta switch to the macro mode pretty early. Luckily, the ultra-wide has some improvements too, so that's not the end of the world. Then, a 48 megapixel sensor also enables this new 2x button. Doesn't seem like that huge of a deal, but it's literally just cropping in on the middle 12 megapixels of this huge sensor. So it's essentially like an optical zoom. It's not like you're going to lose quality the way anything less than 3x would have been before on iPhones, because it was cropping into an already 12 megapixel image. The 48 megapixel sensor also enables this new action mode in